Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Mint Think Tank, the Inner Circle, titled Tech in Insurance: The Rise of Customer Insights. Now, as we have seen and experienced, the digital revolution in India has disrupted businesses across industry lines, and the insurance sector has been no exception. In fact, the insurance sector seems to have embraced digital transformation thanks to advancement made in data analytics and customer experience. Digital technology has the power to cut through traditional barriers of adoption faced by organizations that include low levels of product awareness, few touch points through the customer journey, limited access to information, service availability, and payments. Now, as organizations move forward on their digital path, new age technologies are being leveraged to gain customer insights, which are being deployed towards improving product and service offerings while also providing for a totally refreshed CX, where insurers are focusing on a customer oriented approach 24 by 7. In this fifth episode of Mint Think Tank in association with Salesforce, we will highlight how India's leading insurance companies are charting a unique growth story by using analytics for risk management, creating workflow automations, and conversational interface. I'm your host Gautam Srinivasan, and joining me on today's discussion are Anjana Rao, Chief Strategy Officer at India First Life Insurance, KV Deepu, President of Operations and CX at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Company, Anubhav Rajput, CIO and Head of Digital and Operations at Cholamandalam MS General Insurance, S. Ganesan, EVP and Head of Technology at ICICI Prudential Life Insurance Company, and Hitesh Sahijwala, Regional Vice President at Salesforce India for the FinServe Business Unit. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this talk on the rise of customer insights in the context of increasing digital transformation in the insurance space. Hitesh, let's get the ball rolling with a broad look at the new rules of CX and customer relationships in this very hyper competitive world, and of course, the best ways to turn customer conversations into customer happiness. Your thoughts?
So thanks to you, thanks to the eminent panelists for giving me this opportunity to be part of this session. So interestingly, I think you've touched upon a very sensitive and an important point. Customer experience is becoming the new battlefield for insurance companies. The pandemic, as we all know, has changed the way customers interact with insurer companies that don't digitize their delivery, service, and communication channels will fall behind in this increasingly technology-centric world. It's very clear. In my opinion, I think three tenets for building a delightful customer experience are as follows. A, digital and transparent claim settlement process. This is of pivotal importance as customer retention and loyalty are at the heart of the insurance industry and transformation. And both are largely driven by how the customers interact with the insurers, specifically when it comes to the claims experience. Innovating the claims experience and using technology to implement a low-touch claims process will definitely differentiate companies from their contemporaries. The second one, important tenet, is personalization. I think personalization is the key to delivering stellar customer experience consistently, and I'm emphatic on the word consistently. The ability to tailor experiences and messaging can give providers a competitive advantage over their contemporaries. Third, I think very important is product simplification and contextual products. This is a very important aspect of creating winning CX, primarily because we need to demystify the insurance industry. And there are a lot of challenges. One, from an articulation perspective, I think the customers are a little bit confused with the articulation and availability of products. Second is creating products which are easier for the customer to understand. We know the plethora of solutions, technology, products available. The customers are getting very confused on what is an appropriate product for them in the current state of affairs. Third is contextual. I think this is very important because gone are the days where we can, be very generic. We need to be providing bite-sized insurance products catering to specific niche and need of that specific customer. And finally, the omni-channel access is going to be delighting the customers, and we all know it. We live in a world of millennials, though I may not be a millennial, but we live in the world of millennials. And you may start your insurance journey from the web. You may end it on the mobile or in your laptop or in your iPad. But the unified single source of truth is of pivotal importance when the customers are engaging with the insurers.
Well, it has, and it has set the stage. Some important points that you brought up, for which we'll get the response from Anjana, Deepu, Ganeshan, and Anubhav, and encapsulating some of the points that you mentioned when it comes to, say, transparency in the claims process, which digitalization can afford, and of course, having a customized or creating unique experiences for customers, and in that process, you come up with simplified products where the contextual need of that product is well explained, where it opens up a whole new revenue model. And some instances that I've seen in this context are these switch on switch off insurance products, which came about especially during the pandemic, again responding to the need of the customers. When some of the folks saw that you have insurance on for a certain period of time, then you don't need it, you switch it off, then when you need it, you switch it on back again. Some great points there. Let me get a response from the rest of the panelists and see how they worked their magic to make sure that their enterprises stayed ahead of the curve. Anjana, I'll come to you. The insurance industry, it has truly been one of the early adopters of technology, and the pandemic increased that urgency of this transformation as customers demanded digital options at an unprecedented scale. So I want to understand from you, what kind of changes have you initiated at India First Life Insurance to keep up with the times?
Sure. Thanks, Gautam. I think most of the changes Hitesh has very nicely summed up in his response. So it would be mostly a repetition, but however, let me just make an attempt. So while there has been, while digital agenda has been, primary, has been there for the insurance companies even prior to pandemic, as you rightly said. Now we see a major shift. The shift is in the operating model itself. Where now we are relooking at our processes and trying to figure, can I have a process where I can make it zero operations or minimalize the dependence on humans? So when you're designing the process, no dependence on human intervention, no wait time, no induced wait time, and how can technical solutions, the emerging solutions which are there, the technology pieces are there, how they can plug in the gaps. Another thing which I would say is ecosystems. We've started looking at, so as the customer has evolved, because the customer has adopted it in a very,
a great point that she mentioned, which is that customers have become much more, how should I put it, enabled in terms of making use of the options. It's no longer a case where the enterprise is wondering, how do I make sure that customers understand this product. Now it's the reverse. Customers demand that you come up with new products which kind of solves their issues and in that process, as you address that pain point, it becomes a rich and unique customer experience. Deepu, we've had these conversations on CX. You've outlined the best practices. So let's encapsulate a few of the points that you mentioned earlier in the context of how addressing pain points can actually be one of the greatest enablers of a rich CX experience. And also we see how important automation is playing a role, especially in solving these issues. And if you could give some instances from, say, Bajaj Allianz General Insurance's experience in the use of automation to improve overall customer experience.
Thank you, Gautam. I can share, a plethora of examples. So I'll stick to, some of the high impact ones. As both Hitesh and Anjana spoke. If you look at the insurance industry, the moment of truth is the claims experience. That's the reason you buy insurance, right? Why do you buy insurance? You want the company to come to your aid, when you are in trouble. And let's take motor insurance, which is the biggest form of insurance. What used to happen when you typically crashed your car? You would have had to call up the insurance company. They would locate a surveyor nearest to the site of the crash. He would then come over, examine the extent of damage, submit his report, and the whole process would kick in. We said, how do we, revolutionize this and, crunch it, from days to minutes? So we said, let's minimize the effort here. So what we did, we just made it a two-step process. So for starters, in case you crash your car, unfortunately, you don't need to, call us up and, ask us for a surveyor. What we ask you to do is to just take photographs of the car. And the second step, upload them using the mobile app. So just two steps at your end. And what we do at our end, that's where automation comes in. We've deployed a combination of machine vision. Machine vision is, where we, analyze the images, and AI. The AI engine, leveraging our years of expertise in claims, works, with machine vision by looking at the images which the customer has uploaded. And in just 20 minutes, in a matter of minutes, it can assess the extent of claim damage and convey the amount to the customer. The customer gives his consent, and up to certain amounts, the money is transferred. So you minimize customer effort, and what used to take days now takes, as I said, less than 20 minutes up to certain amount. So clearly a case of how automation, can come to the aid of customer experience at a point that the friction could have been the highest. So that's one example. The other, let me give you one more example, and we launched this, nearly now 5 years ago. This is in the area of travel insurance. Let's, assume somebody is taking a long international flight and the flight gets delayed. What happens? You're caught up in the rigmarole of, planning your bookings all over again, right? The next flight, your hotel bookings, your meetings, right? Postponing them, refixing them. And at that point of time, if someone were to tell you, that you are eligible for a claim payout, because of flight delay, it wouldn't be a priority, right? You would say, who's going to go through the whole hassle of, sharing paperwork? So we said, let's simplify this for customers. So we deployed a blockchain-based solution by which we shifted the onus of proving the delay onto ourselves. So the customer doesn't have to, give us, an email or letter from the airline that the flight is delayed. We have immutable proof that the flight is delayed. And in a fundamental change to the whole value chain of insurance, we get in touch with the customer. We tell him that, he's eligible for for a claim payout. And we just need to know that, he's on that flight, and the money would be transferred to him cheerfully. Now, this would not have been possible, without automation. So, again, as I said, the whole idea of automation is at the point of greatest impact, where the friction can be the highest, make life simple for customers. So
absolutely. Anjana, that's a recap of the point that you mentioned, which is that when you address that pain point, that is the magic point of connect between the customer and the company. One other example also is that it's broad basing the reach of customers as well, right? In some of my earlier discussions, this has come up that some folks are using AI to detect signatures, and in a way it's a signature verification tool, whereby it's making it easier and in an automated manner to make sure that that it goes through. Deepu, I believe you have something to add. My microphone is on mute. If you have something to add there.
I think, I just wanted to, basically share, those two examples, which I've done. And
I'm sure there are many more. That will be a whole entire different panel discussion.
Exactly. So happy to share more, as we go along.
And that's, I think, the beauty of it. So many use cases are emerging. Anjana, let me get you back in. You were stating your point of addressing customer pain points. And it's wonderful to see all these use cases which are emerging. And in a sense, it's building up momentum where if you are doing something, I'm sure the competitors are not going to sit back and say, well, let them do what they do. We'll just do things the old-fashioned way.
True, very true. And so just, definitely, I mean, everybody's thinking through, everybody's looking at the journey. I think everybody's in the process of revisiting the journey, identifying the frustrating moments and, trying to work upon them Hitesh mentioned about personalization, so now earlier there was data analytics in a silo and there were your processes. Now marrying the processes and the data-driven insights and how do you personalize that experience for the customer has become a primary agenda. So while we call it segment of one, I know, it's work in progress, but still, that's an attempt, at least that's an attempt which we are making as to how we can personalize the experience for that end user. Yeah.
All right. And it also makes me wonder how the operating model, as you mentioned, right, how the operating model is tuned to make sure that all these use cases, they build momentum rather than just being a flash in the pan. Any insights there, Anjana, that you'd like to share as to, something which works when it comes to making your operating model robust enough to embrace these kind of innovations?
So essentially, one primary shift, again, Hitesh covered in his, narrative is ecosystem. Most of the organizations are looking at how do I, this has opened up new revenue streams as I was talking about. So, rather than making the customer be a part of my journey, how can I become a part of the customer's journey where he's spending maximum time? So if there is an ecosystem which the customer is already used to, how do I embed insurance within that ecosystem, which again drives the need for having small products or sachet products, as Hitesh mentioned. So that's the driver. The products, the way we define today, yes, there is a big scope, and there is lots of work happening as to how do we simplify our products, how do we make them, for non-life at least they have attempted pay per use. Well, there would be lots of changes which would be required within life insurance, but yes, small ticket products is something which is on the agenda of most of the, life insurance organizations, so that we can easily embed it into the digital journey of the customer.
That's a fair point. In some of my earlier discussions, an
Yeah.
interesting example has come about whereby the person said that whenever we have a CX discussion or a CX meeting in the organization, we always make sure that there is an empty chair in the room that represents the customer. So therefore, they always think about the customer point of view within their discussions, which organically helps them think about the customer journey, and not just in terms of, as you said, Anjana, a customer product. It's a journey. So you need to make sure that you're there in every step of the way, and you build that connect as each step of the way progresses. That's a great point, but also let's not forget insurance is a very highly regulated sector, and the concept of risk is paramount. So management of risk, that becomes an integral part of the business for insurers. Ganeshan, let me get you in at this point. How can insurers leverage the power of big data and analytics to manage risks? Your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Gautam. Good evening to everybody. As Deepu said, Deepu started with the moment of truth for an insurance company is the experience the customer would have in terms of claims and all. You also talked about having an empty chair that would represent the customer. So basically, the way we look at here is during the stage of onboarding itself, the risk have to be evaluated, so that the experience when it comes to the claims and all is really taken care in an unfortunate event and all. So that's the way the life insurance look at the risk actually. So currently the way we are seeing here is from it's a kind of real time analytics is what we are seeing. So the role played by big data as well as analytics is it's very predominant. The quantum of data that life insurance have to deal with is not only the data of the entire the entire customer cohort right from the inception, but also it has to look at the industry data as well. So for example, today we look at the data at the company level right from the inception. We also look at the industry level data which is available from the IAB. In addition to that, the data is also available from the bureau. For example, LexisNexis and all is the bureau at the global level. So and also we look at the Experian and other kind of bureau data. So basically, what we are looking at here is we look at the entire range of data, and then the quantum of data is extremely high, and analytics is being used in terms of understanding the pattern, so that at the onboarding stage itself, the right decision can be made, so that if it is issued, we would be in a position to honor the claims when it comes and whenever there is an unfortunate event and all. So from that perspective, I think analytics and big data play a phenomenal role assessing the risk and also give a seamless experience at the onboarding stage. For example, I can get the analytics kind of thing within couple of minutes. I will be able to understand whether the customer profile is good enough to onboard or not. So I think that's the kind of quantum of compute power currently being available, and it's all done in a real-time kind of analytics.
All right. And how are you ensuring that the quality of data which you garner, because at the end of the day, that the data that you garner is going to result in insights, but how do you make sure that the quality of data that you received is top notch and can actually enable you to gain insights?
Okay, so I think Gautam, it's a good question. When it comes to the data that you have at the company level, and also the data that you get from IAB, these are all top-notch quality. Same thing happens when you get the data from the reinsurer or the model that you would apply from the reinsurer and all. So these are all kind of curated ones. Whereas when you look at the data that you get from clickstream or social media kind of thing, that's not you may not be you may not be giving that kind of weightage in your model and all. So that's the way we look at it. We give a kind of high quality, high weightage kind of thing for the data that we own and we get from the industry and from the bureaus. When you look at the data from social media, we will not give that kind of weightage. It will be used for pattern analysis kind of purpose. That's the way we look at it.
All right. Hitesh, let me get you to respond to that. Considering richness of customer data today and real-time insights, those have enabled insurers to understand their customers better and create personalized experiences, as Deepu, Anjana, and Ganeshan have mentioned. So from your perspective, can you share a few use cases where Salesforce has enabled insurers with actionable insights?
Yeah, thanks, Gautam. I'll do that. Before I get in, but I just wanted to make a few points. Digital transformation in the insurance world is here to stay. I mean, we've been talking about it in long terms, but let me give you a few pointers from my point of view. I think the insurance world was looking at from a technology perspective to an inside out world, right? Where you were talking about legacy system, siloed product data, complex architectures comprising multiple systems of record, which reduced the quality of service. That was an inside out view. But today's competitive market, it's an outside in view, where you're looking at systems of engagement, looking back into the data. And, that's what Deepu rightly mentioned. You're making customer journeys frictionless. And this is where technology plays a very pivotal role. Now, from an innovation point of view, no more innovation is only related from a technology driven, it's related from a business. Because insurance is not about protection, but it's about prevention to reduce risk and incentivize the intended behavior. That's what is important from a business perspective. We have to look at it. We all spoke about data, so I won't get into it, but we talk about real-time analytics. It's not only from a personalized services, cross-sell, upsell, but also to ensure against potential loss and sharper underwriting. You've seen the kind of leakages all our colleagues from the insurance world have faced, and this definitely will help you prevent from leakages in the underwriting. Now, we've also seen a couple of partnerships in the insurtech world, and I'm sure you'll appreciate that. It's no more about talking silos of organizations in insurance. You have insurance, you have banker assurance, you have agents, brokers, intermediaries, which are here to stay. And if you look at it, these are being built for collaboration such as incubation, capital investment, co-creation, distribution, from those perspectives. And globally, I'm sure you have the data. There's $19 billion of investment being made in insurtech. And in fact, India is one of the fastest growing fintech world, if I may say, through with an adoption rate of 87%. Now, why this is all going to be helping the transformation of the industry as well as enhancing customer expectations. That's what is important. Also, regulatory, and we should be thanking the government. Increase in FDI limits are fostering innovation and creation of level playing field. That's what the government is doing. So now, this being said, the stage being set from a digital transformation perspective, what Salesforce got to offer, I thought I'll be very clear on that. We're talking about three different areas of focus. One is the systems of engagement. And what I mean by systems of engagement, we are not talking about a specific product or a technology. Salesforce will primarily provide a glue or an engagement platform to enhance the experience across all the key stakeholders in the insurance value chain, which could start from a distribution management, move on to a lead management, move on to a customer management. It can go to quotes, underwriting, policy, admin, benefit, and policyholder service. Because these are some of the journeys, and I'm sure my colleagues who are there in the industry would better understand than me, are critical. So that's the engagement platform we could play, and this is unified, intelligent, automated platforms we can offer. So that's part one on system of engagement. Part two, very important, is integrations. Now I'm linking this back to the business need where we said we have insurtechs partners coming in. Integration is very critical. You may have systems of engagement, but how are you going to be integrating to your ecosystem of applications? We've seen traditionally insurance organizations have tons of application stacks. You have 50, 60, 70 applications. All this needs to be integrated. And there are technologies available within Salesforce because we've been doing acquisition over the last 10 years, and I've forgotten the number of acquisitions we are doing as I'm getting older. But we've done tons of acquisition, and MuleSoft being one of them was helping us to look at integration. So that takes care of your integration within and integration outside, integrating to the existing ecosystem of applications and integrating to the outside world of insurtech companies, intermediaries, partners, brokers, and all that. The third important part of the business is analytic solutions. They play a very pivotal role to provide database intelligence for decision support, meaningful insights, nudges, and suggest the next best course of action throughout the life cycle of customers. That is very critical because this goes, for example, for renewals, persistency, enhancement of covers. That's the entire life cycle. We are not going to be, selling policies once and forgetting the customer. So that's what is Salesforce got to offer, from an end-to-end or a wall-to-wall kind of a service, what we are seeing. Also, as I mentioned earlier, contextual and embedded insurance. And I think Deepu did talk about travel insurance. I have seen, and I'm sure, you all know, bite-sized, small ticket, short tenure products are getting very critical. We've seen the ride insurance provided on Ola, through which 23 million rides were insured in less than 10 months. That's a big embedded insurance use case we've come out with. I have seen toffee insurance and digit insurance, which are coming out with similar bite-sized products. Hence, the challenge today, what we are talking about from a technology and innovation, is also emerging today is due to insurance companies managing high velocity, short tenure products at scale. This is very important. High velocity, short tenure products at scale. Do keep in mind, and I did mention this earlier, millennials now constitute over 40% of the workforce and have a bearing influence on building these experiences. So all this has to be taken into consideration when you're building technologies, you're talking about innovation. I
Absolutely.
hope that made sense.
Let me get Deepu to respond to that. Now more than ever, Deepu, it seems that we, insurance companies needs a glue that holds everything together, because from everything from large size product to bite size products, you still need that technology fabric weaved across your organizations in service of coming up with that. A quick point of view before we address some of the challenges.
I think I like the way, you articulated, the need for a glue. And I think the only glue which is required is customer focus, right? Because the customer is the reason for, everything that we do, and while it sounds like a cliche, but, that really, is what, sets you apart, across the entire life cycle. And Gautam, to your earlier point, just, weaving across the point that you made that you need a glue, across the whole aspect. I think one thing we have seen, especially in the last, couple of years, I think it started with, digitizing the entire landscape, the physical landscape. That's where self-service came in. So I think that's one glue, right, across the entire aspect. Today, you can buy a policy on your own. You can file a claim on your own. You can get service requests through the entire life cycle on your own. So that's one glue. The other glue, Gautam, as we go forward into the new normal, is how do we blend the best of man and machine, right? Because people have seen, the digital experience, but when do customers come to you? They come to you when they're in tough times. They need empathy and they need a healing touch. So today the owners are shifted to how do you humanize the digital, right? How do you bring in the efficiency of bots, yet you bring in, the human touch. So, I think that's clearly, one aspect which is coming in. And therefore, there are two things. One is a shift to voice, because text can be very, very, it can be very professional, right? Whereas voice can bring in human element. That's one angle, and the other is multilingual, especially in our country, right? Because the choice by default is English, but how can you speak the customer's language? So I think these are the 2-3 angles which clearly create stickiness across the entire landscape.
Absolutely, and I'll have Ganeshan respond to some of the points that you mentioned, Deepu. But before that, since we're talking about a glue, we've spoken about CX, a rich CX experience, but let's not forget insurance. It's the business of managing risk, and when we speak about risk, there's also about data security, points about data security which comes up. So let me ask Anjana for her point of view on the fact that today customers seeking a life insurance cover or say filing for claims, they're interacting with insurance companies across multiple devices and platforms. So how can companies identify vulnerabilities in the network and say perform static and dynamic security assessments to keep consumer data safe from malice? Your thoughts, Anjana?
Yeah, so security as an agenda has always been a very high priority for insurance carriers. I mean, it's ultimately customers' data, and data breaches instances are also, they impact the brand, they impact the repute of the brand. So essentially, the way things have evolved, the way, as you mentioned, multiple devices, customer accessing solutions which are going. So earlier also, every time you roll out a solution, one used to do vulnerability assessment tests. So I think with the evolution of digital solutions, we also see evolution of vulnerability assessment testing also changing. So earlier, what we used to do is, it was like how Hitesh says, inside out. We used to do the testing on a piece of code before it gets launched. So it's like, you are trying to figure out whether this particular piece of code can be hacked, whether there are any weak links in the code. And you try to identify those vulnerabilities, you work on those vulnerabilities, fix them, and it gets certified. But now, as we are into an era where, so dynamic assessment has seeped in, where it is like actually you are doing the testing at the runtime,
Mm,
and that's where you are able to figure whether whether there are any vulnerabilities which are getting exposed while a transaction is happening. So
mm,
one set of testing is which we do normally before we roll out an application. But now here we see a shift where dynamic assessment of vulnerabilities is slowly becoming an integral part, at least for critical applications or critical transactions, where there is an exchange of personal information or there is an exchange of financial information happening. Yes,
mm.
I mean, it has carved out its own space.
All right. So, from that point of view, say, how do you see the evolving tech landscape changing your role and maybe the role of your company and how it interact with, say, technology providers who it works with to make sure that from a data security standpoint, you stand tall? Because as I look at the statistics for cybersecurity in general, each year keeps progressively getting worse. And let's not forget, we have had years worth of digital transformation compressed into months. So, which means as the channels open externally and internally, so do the need for security. So, your thoughts on this, Anjana?
So essentially, I see a new breed. I mean, now there cybersecurity has. So earlier it used to be called IT security, but now I see that function evolving, and there is a place for cybersecurity certified professionals who have come in. So who are not just looking at that inside out approach, but they are also looking at outside. And when we are exposing our applications to an external entity, how those applications, are being, whether they are being interfaced or tracked by any third party through various malware attempts or whatever. So I see one distinct thing is there is a new skill set which has got added to IT security, to the erstwhile IT security team, which is a new set of policies have come in. Now, I mean, so whenever we used to roll out a new initiative, a new application, so now I see everybody gets involved. There's a risk team who gets involved, who says, is there a per PIE? Is it on cloud? Is it on Indian cloud? Is it, so there is a big checklist which has again come in, which, so you have to go through multiple rounds of certifications before you expose a functionality on cloud, or, when you roll out a new functionality. So, yeah, this is my take.
All right,
I
let me
hope
get
it
in the
answers your question, Gautam.
It does, and I'm going to see what's the enabler's perspective to the answer that you have provided. So, Hitesh, your point of view on this.
Thanks, Gautam. I think security and compliance is of very prime importance to all of us. And I keep getting shot down by all our customers, being on the cloud. How do you keep us safe? So, firstly, and I'm sure, we have a lot of maturity in Indian customers today. They understand it's not about security related to the cloud versus on premise. Let's be clear, because most of the attacks are coming from outside and not inside. Okay, that's primary importance to understand. Second is, and I'm not advocating Salesforce, but I'm saying from a cloud service provider, whether you have the Amazons of the world, the Microsoft of the world, the kind of systems in place today you have, where you're talking about security at not only an infrastructure level, you're talking about security at a network level, you're talking about application level, you're talking about at a site level, is predominantly very high. A. B. These people have access to global security threats and inspections. So when you have an access to global security threats, you are ahead of the curve when any security threat is going to be coming and attacking your system. And that's why they can apply patches. Let me give you a very classic example, and I'm sure this will make relevance to all of our dear friends who are listening to this. We had Apache Log4j in December. I'm sure each one of us faced. And without naming customers, when I was talking to one of my customers who had their systems on premise, he said it took time for us to actually identify the security vulnerability and put a patch to it. Now, cloud service providers were able to do this on day zero. They were able to do this on day zero, apply the patches, and fix the issue because of the spectrum of a global understanding and vulnerabilities available overall, and provide remedies and patches. So that's the other part of it. The third important sector is, the updates and patch updates which are happening from a cloud. It's all pushed down the line. You don't wait for any specific. It's happening seamlessly, like your Apple phone. I'm sure you don't realize there are upgrades happening. That's the way cloud service providers are providing mass distribution of updates and upgrades to prevent security-related threats. I thought I'd just add on those points, a little bit tangential, but may make a lot of relevance to the insurance industry.
Absolutely. And it also leaves the bandwidth for CISOs and CXOs to focus on their primary objective, which is in service of the customer and making sure that the organization is doing all that it can to make sure that customer experience is as rich as it can be without worrying about the nuts and bolts. Speaking of CX, we've covered where the insurance industry is there so far. Let's see where it is headed. Ganeshan, picking up a thread which Deepu mentioned about the options which are available, especially when it comes to text versus voice. Now, in a consultation heavy sector such as yours, where say users like to have a constant advisor to strengthen their decision making and also needing say 24/7 support for claim queries, one of the technologies that has taken over that I see across is chatbots. So how effective have they proven to be, and where are we headed next?
So Gautam, I think from the effectiveness perspective, I think the conversational interfaces has really gone to a level where it can service about 90% plus service requests from the customer. For example, what was happening earlier, people have to go to the branch or through a website kind of thing earlier. And most of the transactions would happen only through the branches in the erstwhile couple of years back also. But since currently the chat interfaces that we have got, for example, it can be bot or it can be voice bots, the kind of 90% of transactions can be handled by the bot itself. In case if the intent is not very clear to the bot, the call patching is done immediately for important transactions. For example, if it's a premium payment and if the customer is struggling in understanding, in giving the credentials so that the transactions can be completed, then the call patching. So basically, what I'm saying here is the conversation interfaces can handle majority of the queries from the customer. In case of the intent not understood by the bot, can be call patched with a kind of live agent. If it is not an important transaction, that can be handed over to an agent in the behind who can do the chat interfaces and all. And this is with respect to text chat. When it comes to the humanoid calling and all, the voice thing, it's like, for example, for the renewal or persistency kind of calling, we can have about some 50,000 calls happening at the scale in an hour or so. And the person, the customer who is receiving the call may not be able to even identify that the call is being made by the voice call and all. We have to interact with about lakhs of customers on a daily basis, and it's practically impossible to have a call center agents doing it kind of physical to physical kind of thing. So we are seeing a huge amount of traction both in the voice chat as well as in the text chat. And we have been able to service about 90% of our otherwise that would happen through the human touch points and all. So that's the kind of maturity level we are seeing currently.
All right, Deepu, your response. We spoke about this earlier. It's also about segmentation of these chatbots in terms of different use cases, where it's about smart strategy, knowing what's the context to deploy a particular chatbot, where a particular interaction works, and where, say, a physical interaction works.
I think I'll cover both the aspects, Gautam. One is, some crystal ball gazing, which you asked Ganeshan. as well as where exactly does the combination of man and machine come in. So like you rightly said, you see, bots are programmed, right, and they are programmed for low hanging fruit and a certain level of intelligence, and then when it comes to complex scenarios, that's where humans kick in. So I think one thing which has helped is assisted digital, right? Because you don't get into whole hog automation, from the word go. So you have a human being who steps in, in case the bot is unable to answer a query, and then it takes it through the completion. So for the customer, there is no break in service. And then using AI and NLP, you teach the bot subsequently. So its own percentage of first time query resolution, is on the increase all the time. So that's one area. The other is, just touching on what Ganesan said, we have seen in digital, that it's largely been self-service and text. But I think increasingly, we are seeing, people gravitating towards, voice and video. Because the beauty of, voice is, it becomes that much more human. And video, all we all know is it's a new book, right? And, it can really, help you in terms of seeing it, from multiple dimensions and, getting, full clarity. So I think these are two ways in which we see things heading. And I think overall, as we get into this landscape, we spoke about multilingual earlier, and we also spoke about the fact that it's about humanizing the digital. I think the day is not far off, right? When you ask somebody, how many people in your team, and he says, yeah, 5 human beings and 5 bots, right? So I think that's how I see it.
Everyone is an Iron Man, if you had to use a sort of a comic book reference. But
That's
I
right.
think that's where the narrative has also shifted from the earlier fears of automation as a replacement tool. It has now become augmentation tool for the existing workforce, to make sure that they are more productive and they can come up with much more unique and richer experiences, since it's leaving them with the bandwidth free to focus on the customer. Now, we've spoken about a lot of trends, from bite-sized products to automation to new customer experiences. A quick word from all of you on which new trend excites you, especially in the insurance space or the online insurance space or the digital insurance space. Which new trend excites you the most, and how has your organization, or how is your organization strategizing to keep up with say that new trend that you see? Anjana, any point of view that you'd like to share, the next new trend which excites you the most? A quick view from you before I hear from Deepu and Ganeshan.
So I am right now Gango on exploiting voice and enabling voice as a UI rather than the traditional GUI. And I somewhere strongly believe that voice as a UI is going to lead to a displacement file. It will lead to a displacement, be it sales, be it my frontline. I mean, rather than going to a GUI and interacting, if I'm going to use voice-based commands and it helps me to open up my daily dashboards, or just tells me what my numbers are, what I need to do, or delivering the nudges. So I see voice as one area which can be exploited and become more relevant to the customers, as Deepu says, multilingual. So today the technology gives you the ability to, use voice in multilingual.
Absolutely. Voice activated personal assistants. We are getting there. We are getting there to a level where it, as Ganeshan said, it almost seems seamless, where you're left wondering, are you speaking to a bot or an actual person? Fair point, Anjana. Ganeshan, coming to you, the next trend that excites you and how your company is geared up for it.
So Gautam, as I indicated, I think from the text chat, that perspective, I think we achieved the maturity level. From the voice level also, I think we have achieved the maturity level. In the sense, at the scale we can call, and we can, irrespective of whatever the conversation happens from the customer side, the bot understands and speaks in a natural kind of language and all. So what we are seeing currently here is, having achieved this maturity, we are seeing an exciting use case now, which is a combination of text and voice. So basically what I indicate here is, we have to deal with customers to get the consent from the customers for various aspects and all. For example, the customer consenting the health parameters, the customer consulting some of the parameters which we want them to be aware, as well as what they are consenting and all. So this aspect earlier would be like, I would send a kind of link, the link will be opened by the customer will blindly go and say yes or no kind of thing. From that perspective, we want to have the customer with us in terms of going through all the details in an appropriate way, registering their response one after another, and then be sure that everything has been played back well to the customer kind of thing. It's in the interest of customer. So we are now looking at a combination of text and voice, which is like the details will be shared with the customer in a format the customer can read. The same thing will be read by the voice, and then it will be the voice will guide in terms of navigating to next and followed by another ones, and then finally getting the consent of the customer. So this particular use case, we are seeing a phenomenal traction as well as interest from the customer, and it gives us a kind of view that the customer really understand and then consenting, as against we not being in a position to record whether it was well understood by the customer and all. So I think this particular thing is exciting, and we are seeing phenomenal number of use cases in this area. Be it playing the welcome kit, be it getting the talent rating kind of thing, any kind for a lapse policy, what is that the customer is consenting. So many use cases which were primarily focused in a monotonous way earlier is now done in a very interactive way. So that's something which we discovered in the last month or so, and we are trying to put to use now.
All right. Deepu, your thoughts as an extension of what Ganesan said. Are we looking at a paradigm of a more co-creative engagement of value between the enterprise and customer? Do you think that's the next big trend?
Yeah, I think clearly, Gautam, and I think, there are two aspects here. One, of course, Anjana and Ganesan touched upon voice and, the combination of text and voice and, the myriad technologies which can come to the fore. So let me give you two additional dimensions rather than, repeat them. I think one, COVID-19 is not the last black swan event that we have seen. And I think the challenge today is you need to be prepared with a response and with speed, for a situation which you cannot foresee today, right? We didn't forecast, COVID-19. So I think clearly that's one dimension. So whatever be the technology, something happens and then you need to be prepared immediately. I think, the other aspect is to a point on co-creating, for example, if you look at co-browsing, right? Where you basically, work with the customer on the internet and you navigate, with him through the entire landscape. Or if you look at curated experiences where, let's say, the customer is not able to physically travel, right? Let me take an example from a different industry. Let's take real estate. If you're not able to travel to a sample flat, right? But if you can create its digital equivalent in the universe, right? And then run him through. So that way, you co-create and then you work with the customer. So I completely agree with you.
All right. So a base version of a meta reality that you could
Yes.
say. And this industry loves jargon. But taking that point forward, as you mentioned, as volatility still remains the same, right? We had COVID, tomorrow it might be something else. These are, as they call, VUCA times. It's marked by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So, Deepu, I want to understand from you how, say, organizations can leverage the digital experience or the digital DNA that they have built, but at the same time, and this is the key part, ensure profitability for the business. Because while we've talked about exciting possibilities and new experiences, at the end of the day, somebody is looking at the balance sheet and saying, how much are we making? So from that balance of customer-centric experiences and profitability for the business, what's going to be your point of view?
I think it's fairly simple, Gautam, and you're right. Ultimately, you do look at, the ROI. So there are two aspects. I think one is when you're investing in digital experiences, it calls for capital expenditure right upfront. But then you save, through, let's say, savings on effort, in terms of manual effort, through transactions. So a CapEx outgo, but OpEx saving, right? Spread across multiple transactions. That's one. The other is when you start investing in these experiences, when you're industry first, right? If you look at your brand value, that starts to, build its own momentum, and then a lot of customers flocking to you, right? I mean, you become a brand, and then you become an iconic brand, and then there's pull. You convert push into pull. So I think these are two areas. One is a little more short term, and the other is quite long term. And I think that's how you build the financial equation into the overall landscape.
All right. Convert push into pull, easier said than done. But that's why we have the masters of their craft here to tell you how to achieve it using the power of technology and making it all look very seamless. Well, as we head towards the last leg of the discussion, let me get in Hitesh for the last word on the conversations that we have had. And Hitesh, you've heard the panelists talk about the next big trend that they see influencing the industry. Now, of course, customer experience is truly the backbone of every relationship, and it's going to be part of any new trend that comes up. Now, with most insurance relationships being long term, how can insurance companies today ensure uniformity of CX, irrespective of channel chosen by customers, and how do insurers today create a personal experience while deploying chatbots to ensure faster response times. Bring these points together along with any thoughts that you have on the trends defining the next 10 years for this industry.
Thanks, Gautam. While I'm not an astrologer, but from a technology point of view, I can give you some sight which I have, and thanks to my dear customers, I get my information from my customers because what they think is we try and execute from there. Let me be realistic and honest. So, firstly, I think we did cover up a couple of points, and I won't repeat it. But the important journeys are a couple of them. One is we talk about personalized customer experience, very very critical, and synchronization of channels is super critical. Single source of truth, unique communication channels are very important. The customer, as I told you in the beginning, starts from the web, gets onto a laptop, moves onto a mobile or into a chatbot. You can't have communication being, asynchronous. So it has to be synchronized. So that's very, very critical, firstly. Second is, are expecting, the customers are expecting a lot of intelligence, and so, when I mean customers, it could be our insurance companies also. They expect the policy data and claim histories to provide personalized advice based on unique circumstances. So it's not only channels available, but it's their existing data where you extract the data, curate that data, and provide very unique circumstances. Third is automation, and I know I personally have that. Specifically in the insurance world today, because of automation, you have pre-filled data being done based on the historic set of information you have about the customer. I have seen painfully, and I will say that without naming, customers today, but today, I've seen through at times when you go on the website and you have to make entries multiple times, you start getting upset that, look, yeah, you know me so well as a customer. How do you expect me to fill my name, address, email, wife, family, everything? So auto-filling is very, very critical. I'm just sequencing the whole thing. We spoke about personalization, we spoke about intelligence, we spoke about automation. Now, we spoke about bots also, and bots are definitely going to be the next wave because from a technology perspective, we know what they can do. They provide personalized policy recommendations. They also help reduce cost because the scale of business, what you're talking about today, the penetration is 4% in the insurance in India, far lower, but that scale is going to go up. 160 million odd people here. So if you want to go up scale, if you're going to be, adding more people in your technology or your IT, as rightly mentioned by Deepu, it's going to be cost of operations are going to go up. So bots are definitely going to help filter those conversations and queries before it actually hits an agent or it hits a contact center or somebody. So these four things are very pivotal. Finally, I did talk about collaboration and coexistence and co-creation. Very, very critical because it's not the insurance companies alone. It is the entire ecosystem. Today, you have an insurtech who's talking about doing a customer lead management, or an agent or a broker or a bancassurance. How are you going to be integrating tightly from the lead management coming from one of the channels into the existing onboarding journeys of the insurance organizations, then providing your personalization, automation, intelligence, and chatbot related thing is going to be of pivotal importance because this is the full linkage. It's not about our point products. It's going to be very important when you will be able to increase your footprint. A, you will be providing personalization. B, and you will be doing a lot of cross-sell and upsell. I have seen today also, and that's really, I'm sure you've seen reports and everyone will agree, Customer 360 today, the adoption is just 27%, which is far lower than what we are supposed to do. We all are talking about Customer 360, but it's very critical we start seeing that happening in the real-time world. So that's what I just want to end from my point of view, Gautam.
And that also makes me wonder, when the next billion users come online, how the learnings of what we have gone through in the past 2 or 3 years are going to translate, especially into creating rich, regionalized, contextualized, and personalized experiences for users who might never have had access to such kind of services or products before. The future indeed looks bright, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. That brings us to the end of today's session of Mint Think Tank, the Inner Circle, titled Tech in Insurance, the Rise of Customer Insights. I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us on this conversation and, of course, sharing their insights and lessons. And thanks are also in order to Salesforce for partnering with us for today's presentation. And, of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Till next time, this is Gautam Srinivasan signing off. Have a great day.